Ethiopia wants a coastline.
Ethiopia has been landlocked since Eritrea gained independence in 1993. The port of Assab handled 2/3 of Ethiopia's trade for 5 years, until war broke out between the neighbours in 1998. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the status quo is costly and unsustainable. He wants Ethiopia to have a port of its own.
South Sudan desperately needs another oil pipeline. At first, those sounds like two completely different problems. They are not, because more than 1,500 kilometers away, on a quiet stretch of Kenya's coastline, a project is being built that promises to solve both. This place could completely redraw the map of East Africa, but to understand why, we have to leave Kenya for a moment and head back here, Ethiopia. Because right now, Ethiopia is doing something that has its neighbors on the edge. It's demanding access to the Red Sea, which sounds strange until you realize one thing. Ethiopia has more than 120 million people and not a single kilometer of coastline. Ethiopia is one of the biggest economies in Africa, the second most populous country on the entire continent after Nigeria.
Growth rates are probably only about 7 or 8% a year. I mean, they're still substantial. They're very good growth rates, and Ethiopia certainly needs to have access to the sea. I'm not arguing about that.
Since 1993, the year its coastal province, Eritrea, broke away and became its own nation, Ethiopia hasn't owned a single inch of coast. Almost everything this country buys, sells, ships or imports, 95% of it has to squeeze through one tiny neighbor next door, Djibouti. For the privilege, Ethiopia pays more than $1 billion a year.
Ethiopia has for 30 years it's been dependent upon its neighbors, especially Djibouti, for access to ports and international shipping routes. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the high costs are unsustainable.
And it's not just Ethiopia. Right next door, South Sudan is sitting on oceans of oil and almost no safe way to get it out. Nearly all of it comes from crude, but the only pipelines it has run straight through Sudan, a country that since 2023 has been tearing itself apart in civil war. In 2024, that pipeline ruptured inside a war zone. South Sudan lost an estimated $7 million a day. Ethiopia needed another way to the sea. South Sudan needed another way to move its oil. For more than a decade, Kenya has been building an answer to both. Which brings me out here to this. 4 years ago, almost no ships came to this stretch of Kenyan coast. In 2022, the count was 4. Last year, it was 155. And the ship you are looking at is a 369-meter giant, the single largest vessel ever to dock anywhere in East or Central Africa. Nearly the length of 3 football pitches, too big for Mombasa, too big for almost every port on this side of the continent, but not too big for here.
This port and the LAPSSET corridor constitute an integral part of the broader connectivity that will position Kenya's economy strategically in both the new Africa Continental Free Trade Area and in global trade.
This is Lamu and it's only the beginning. Behind this port is a plan to run a single corridor straight into the heart of Africa. A railway, highways, a pipeline, 3 brand new cities, and to hand those landlocked nations the one thing they have never had, their own road to the ocean. It's called LAPSSET, the Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia Transport Corridor. $25 billion, the most ambitious thing Kenya has ever tried to build. And here is what gets me. For 100 years, the maps of these regions were drawn somewhere else, in London, in Europe, by people who never lived here. The railways, the borders, the port, all decided from outside. This time, 3 African governments sat down at the same table and drew the line themselves. But a plan on a map is just a promise. So before we talk about what they want to build, I want to show you what they already have. The one piece of this $25 billion dream you can actually walk on and stand on. So let me take you here, because to understand a massive $25 billion geopolitical dream, you have to start with one piece that already exists. If you love what I'm doing on this channel, please like and subscribe and let me know in the comment section what you think about this project. Now back to the video. This is Lamu Port, located on Manda Bay up on Kenya's rugged northern coast. There was no city here, there was no highway, there was no power grid. Kenya looked at an empty piece of coast near the Somali border and decided to put one of the deepest harbor on the entire African continent right in the middle of it. It officially opened on May 20th, 2021. 3 working berths, each one exactly 400 meters long. But here is the number that actually matters. The water is 17.5 meters deep. Why is this number important? Because Mombasa, Kenya's main port, the one that has completely run this coast for over 100 years, cannot take the newest giant global ships. The water there isn't just deep enough. That's why Kenya built Lamu, a deep water port design for the next generation of global trade. In August 2025, a massive container ship called the Nagoya Express docked right here. At 335 meters long, it is the longest ship to ever dock anywhere in East Africa. It came to Lamu because Lamu was quite literally the only place on this side of the continent that could hold it. Now, I'm not going to pretend this was an overnight success. This is the honest part. For the first few years, this port was completely quiet. A lot of international critics wrote Lamu off. They called it too far out, too early, a massive white elephant. But watch what Kenya did next. They didn't walk away. They kept the port open, kept talking to shipping lines, and they waited. And then look at this, 155 ships in 2025. The cargo moving through this port went from 74,000 tons to nearly 800,000 tons in a single year. That is almost 1,000% surge. By early 2026, Kenya's transport minister was standing right on this quay, watching 3 ships unload at the exact same time. Now, here is where we have to be completely straight about why this happened. A lot of these ships came because the rest of the world suddenly got very dangerous. Through late 2025 and into 2026, intense fighting around the Red Sea made the usual global route highly risky. Ships heading for Gulf megaports like Dubai's Jebel Ali started turning south instead. One car carrier showed up at Lamu loaded with hundreds of vehicles that were never even meant for Africa. But think about how that rewrites the narrative. When global shipping suddenly needed a safe harbor, this brand new port was ready. It had the depth, the berth, and the room. That is not just luck. That is a country that built way ahead of its time, and then God handed the global moment to prove it. But the port only becomes permanent when there is a railway, a road, a pipeline sitting behind it. And that network, the thing that turns Lamu from Lucky Harbor into front door of East Africa, is exactly what 3 countries set out to build next. To understand the sheer scale of what we are talking about, we have to go back to 2008. Kenya wrote down a massive blueprint for its future called Vision 2030. There were a lot of projects inside it, but this was the absolute monster. It's called the Lamu Port South Sudan Ethiopia Transport Corridor, or LAPSSET. So from now on, I'll be using the word LAPSSET. And it isn't actually one single project. It is 7 massive infrastructure mega projects, all bolted together into a single mega corridor running into the heart of the continent. Add to that 3 brand new resort cities built completely from scratch, 3 international airports, special economic zones, local power plants. Put it all together and you get a price tag of $24.5 billion. Early estimate push it to close to 30. To put that into perspective, when this plan was originally drawn up, that number was equivalent to nearly half of everything Kenya's entire economy produced in a year. But here is the part that I really want you to notice, because it changes how you see the entire project. For most of the last 100 years, the big lines on the map of this region were drawn somewhere else. The railways, the borders, the ports, they were all decided by countries outside of Africa. this one is completely different. The agency running this answers directly to Kenya's president. The first bets at Lamu weren't paid for with massive foreign loans. They were paid for directly with Kenya tax money. The African Union backed it. The regional government also got behind it. Yes, Chinese firms will win a lot of the building contract. And yes, development banks are being asked to help pay. But the idea, the ambition, the core plan, that came from right here. 3 African nations sitting at the exact same table, drawing their own way to the ocean. So that is the dream on paper. But it forces an obvious question. Why? Why carve a brand new line through one of the emptiest, toughest, most isolated corners of the continent when Kenya already had a perfectly good port down south in Mombasa? The answer comes down to 2 countries with zero access to the sea and one part of Kenya that history completely left behind. Start with Ethiopia. It has one of the fastest growing economies on the continent, but it has one massive existential vulnerability. It has not had a single inch of coastline since 1993. Think about that. It is a single point of failure for an economy of 120 million people. And Ethiopia's leader know it. In early 2024, Ethiopia tried to bypass this by signing a highly controversial deal with the breakaway territory of Somaliland for the port access, infuriating Somalia and shaking the geopolitics of the entire region. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has openly called sea access an existential question for his people. But quietly in the middle of that geopolitical storm, there is a much calmer option: Lamu, a stable neighbor, a deep water harbor, and zero disputed sovereignty. Ethiopia has already started testing it, routing early shipment of fertilizer and livestock through Lamu. For Addis Ababa, this corridor isn't a vanity project, it is national security insurance. Now look at South Sudan. This is the world's youngest country, independent only since 2011. They sit on massive oil reserves, but they have a brutal geography problem. Almost all of their oil has to be pumped north through Sudan to reach the sea. And Sudan has been tearing itself apart in a devastating civil war. When Sudan's main export got cut off by fighting, South Sudan's economic lifeline was instantly strangled. A brand new pipeline running south to Lamu completely changes the game. It gives South Sudan a direct route to global market that doesn't run through a war zone. And then there is Kenya's own internal reason. This corridor cuts through a region like Garissa, Isiolo, Marsabit, and Turkana. These areas make up the vast majority of Kenya's land. Fewer roads, less power, less investment. LAPSSET was sold as the project that would finally wire the north into the modern economy. If that promise sounds familiar, it's because it should. A little over a century ago, the British built another railway through this exact same wide terrain. 100 years later, Kenya is attempting something even bigger across the exact same ground. The vision is just as grand. The equation now is whether the engineering and execution can be any wiser. A project this massive lives or dies by one thing: sequencing. If you build in the wrong order, you end up with a useless railway running through a completely empty country waiting for a trade that may never show up. But if you build in the right order, each piece pays for the next. And right now, Kenya is building in the right order. It started at the coast. Instead of gambling billions on inland rails and just hoping the cargo followed, they built the anchor first, the port. Phase 1 is completely done and operational. The foundation is in. With the port ready, the focus has shifted entirely inland to the roads. The first major highway artery runs over 400 kilometers from Lamu through Garissa toward Isiolo, and the build rate is actively accelerating. Look at this metrics from one critical section. In February 2025, only 17 kilometers were complete. Just 7 months later, that figure hit 88 kilometers. That is 71 kilometers of high-grade highway laid across incredibly arid, difficult terrain in little over half a year. Delivering at that pace in a region this remote takes serious security. Kenyan forces now hold the entire corridor under a standing security operation, which has done something measurable. It restored international contractor confidence. The China Communication Construction Company is driving the civil works on the ground right now. Protection and construction moving forward together. Then comes the true spine of the project, the railway. This is engineered for serious, heavy freight. A standard gauge line designed to move cargo 3 to 4 times faster and cheaper than roads. Now, to be clear, no track has physically been laid yet, but the heavy preparatory engineering, the part most people completely ignored, is totally finished. The feasibility studies and the detailed design for Kenya's sections are done. The alignment is locked and the financing is currently being structured through African development institutions. Construction is targeted to begin around 2027. The drawings are done. Inland, the corridor already has its international airport. Isiolo opened its doors on an 800-acre site built to handle over 125,000 passengers a year. They aren't rebuilding it, they are actively extending the runway to 3.5 kilometers to prepare for heavy cargo flights. The pipeline follows the exact same pattern. The front-end engineering and the environmental impact assessment were completed. The 800-kilometer route is fully surveyed. Around the main trunk, high-voltage transmission lines are currently being run out to Garissa and Turkana, connecting regions that have gone without reliable power for generations. Even the human element is moving. The port is actively hiring local youth from Lamu, and the National Land Commission is working to accelerate land compensation along the route. This is what a mega project looks like mid-construction, built piece by piece in the order that makes each piece count. To understand why LAPSSET ultimately matters, you have to stop looking at it as just one port and one road. You have to start looking at it as a master key that unlocks an entire continent. Remember the demand. We have an economy of 120 million people in Ethiopia, depending almost entirely on a single route out through Djibouti. For an economy that size, that is a massive strategic risk. Lamu offers the ultimate alternative, the deepest harbor on the coast, a stable partner, and a direct line to the Indian Ocean. And this isn't just a future forecast, it's actively happening. Cargo is moving today. And look at how the picture just got even bigger. In February 2026, 4 nations, Djibouti, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Uganda, signed a brand new agreement to develop their own interconnected corridor, extending the rail and the road links that already exist. Now, it's tempting to look at this and think, oh, that's just competition for Lamu. But across East Africa, the historic economic problem was never too many trade routes. It was too few. It was single corridors, single points of failure. What we are seeing emerge right now is a resilient network, multiple networks built in parallel, reaching the exact same interior from different directions. More ways in and out means more stable region, and Lamu is uniquely positioned to be one of the strongest links in that web. Because Lamu Port holds an engineering advantage no other port on this coast can match. Its sheer depth, 17.5 meters of water, allows it to effortlessly take post-Panamax vessels, the ultra-large ships that the port of Mombasa physically cannot hold. As the global shipping shifts towards ever bigger vessels to cut costs, the ports that can handle them are the ones that win the trade, and the operating environment is actively falling into place. Working closely with the regional Navy and Coast Guard, Kenya has secured the waters around Lamu Port well enough to be officially removed from international piracy watch list. A deeper harbor, a safer coast, a real cargo already flowing, and two landlocked neighbors actively seeking an outlet. The fundamentals are lining up. If you love jaw-dropping and definitive Africa infrastructure projects like this, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section what you think about this project. See you on the next one.